then everybody ran, including myself and my partner. And then the thing just appeared to just come right on us, and we went flat, and we were waiting to get crushed. And then the thing just went right on us and disappeared. Went right through us into the ground, it seemed like. And it was gone. And then I got picked up by men who were just dressed. They looked like soldiers, but they were dressed in all black. No uniforms, no insignia at all. And then they took me into the base because they interrogated me on how I summoned that UFO.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
Welcome back to Blurry Creatures. You're tuning in to the weird stuff. We just kind of assume people have been on the Blurry bus for a while now, but I'm Nate.
Yeah, and I'm Luke, and it's good to introduce ourselves 100 and how many episodes
exactly,
in, but
right?
No, we're grateful to have you. This is a Journey podcast, so if you are just starting, go ahead and listen. I mean, you can do what you want, but this does surprisingly have a very interesting story arc, and yeah, this is an exciting episode coming up, Nate. We've got John DeSouza, retired FBI agent. We interviewed David Paulides.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it.
That would be a good prologue for this. Listening to Paulides, and John DeSouza was on his film, and John, retired FBI agent, 25 years in. He is they call him the X-Man, right? He had a lot of the really weird cases in the FBI, and since he's been out, he's written a number of books about that, and he, of course, has been on David Paulides' film along with a lot of other places talking about, all of the paranormal stuff and sort of his take on how he interprets that and what those were about, being in law enforcement and also trying to make sense of that. And so it's awesome to have John on. Really excited about this episode.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. Go back and listen to that episode with David Paulides, and it's cool that John came on and he's got a lot to share. I feel like we're gonna have to get a round 2 out of him.
Yeah, we're gonna when you talk to someone who has spent 25 years on chasing the weird, it kind of like feels like John Dover. John Redbird Dover, where you could end up 100 places because of the time they've spent chasing down some of the stuff. So one of the things that stuck out to me, and I know we're going to talk to John about, is in David Paulides' film. I would recommend everyone watch it. It's the latest 411 film. It's called The UFO Connection. John does an interview, and one of the things he said, which I think stuck out to me, and I know it stuck out to some of our members as well, was asked about the UFO phenomena. He talks about it being extra dimensional, and then he moves on. It's very much a matter of fact thing, and so we talk about this a lot, but I don't think it's part of a lot of the mainstream ufology narrative. And this is coming from a guy that spent 25 years investigating a lot of this stuff. So excited to dig into that and talk about dimensional paradigms when it comes to this phenomenon.
Yeah, and one of the things we do a lot on our show is try to give people answers in terms of the biblical narrative, and we're not afraid to get as weird as possible. And it was cool in this one just to give some more context and clues. Sometimes you get more confused as you ask questions, but there is so much more going on. The story is more than just a couple characters, as we know. But if you want to sponsor the show, go to blurrycreatures.com/members. We have the Barbecue coming up. Members, we're having a barbecue with all our wonderful members here. A little waterfront secret location. We rented out a pavilion. We're going to have a party, and you better come.
But yeah, that's one of the things we like to do, is that this little project of ours, Nate, is really sort of burgeoned into a really cool community. I mean, that's one of the coolest things about Blurry Creatures is the community, and you get a lot of people that are interested and looking for better answers. And our members have a lot of perks. There's a lot of private channels, private Facebook group. We can talk about a lot of this stuff and break it down. And there's just a lot of very, very cool people that are a part of this. And so one of the things we try to do with this Blurry, for example, is to create community activities around this space and around people that are like-minded. And so we've got a barbecue. Whenever we talk about this, I think about the Flintstones when they put like the brontosaurus ribs on the grill. We're not doing that
this time.
It'll be Blurry, though.
It will be. You guys are great. And all this stuff is happening because of you guys listening, sharing the show around. And, it's really funny. We'll interview someone and they'll say, dude, I didn't even know my brother was a member of your show. So, and then later I found out he's Blurry. So it's really fun how this little podcast idea we had just blew up into this thing that secretly everyone's getting into the Blurry. So if you're not a member yet, you're missing out on all kinds of fun stuff. And we got a chat coming up. We got chats every month, so lots of ways to connect with us and other people in the community. What do we do now, Luke?
Now we get to John DeSouza, retired FBI agent, and we go straight to the Bone Zone.
You're now entering.
And we are entering. You're now entering the Bone Zone. I feel like that's more appropriate with like Travis Roy or Derek Olson, but it just works because it's so stupid.
This episode is going to be more like you're now entering the Twilight Zone in this one, not the Bone Zone. We're tired. 2 hours into this interview.
Yeah, it's very tired.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Let's get John on the show. All right, so welcome John DeSouza to Blurry Creatures. You're retired special agent, investigator for 25 years, and the real-life X-Files, collector of the real-life X-Files. And you're an author now. You have a new book coming out, Extra Dimensionals, right?
The Extra Dimensionals is right now #1 on all the Amazon lists, #1 bestseller on all the lists for UFOs, for unknown crypto matters, and all these different lists.
Yeah,
and it's gone to #1, and it's been a worldwide phenomena. And the main reason is because a lot of the predictions that I had in there are coming true right now, where you see the government with their phony baloney excusal, and now and the mainstream media with their phony baloney. Hey, you guys are allowed to believe in UFOs now because we say it might be true.
Right.
So all of this is part of a larger agenda that we see coming to fruition. Very true now. And the people who are able to tell that this phenomena is a fake are the people who are the true believers in UFOs. So we know the real qualities of true UFOs and true alien visitors when we see it. So we know that these Tic Tacs, these silver-colored little vehicles, are absolutely not. They are man-made. They are absolutely not UFOs. But anyway, that's my stuff for my intro. I should be saying I am John DeSouza. I am the X-Man. I was an FBI agent for 25 years in the FBI. I did mostly counterterrorism, the big counterterrorism investigations, but I also minored in paranormal investigations as well. So I did a lot of those all over the place, and I went into a lot of these areas that you guys are interested in, also Nate and Luke as well.
I love it because I remember, you were on a podcast I was listening to you on, you were talking about the difference between UAPs are man-made and UFOs are not man-made. And I like that distinction.
Exactly, because what happened in 2004, and then 2012 as well, is that the government, the U.S. Navy, the mainstream media all got together on this enormous campaign to take over the world of ufology from ufology and bring it into this new thing that we're calling UAPs. And now they're ratcheting up the fear of UAPs. UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, but also they call them UATs for Unidentified Aerial Threats. And I got that from no less a villain than Hillary Clinton herself, who said during an interview, yeah, we we've got to watch out for these UAPs and these UATs as well. And so we had all of these people, and now we have senators and congressmen who are now all busily trying to get in on the UAP gravy train, which is a lot of goodies from the military industrial complex that is loving this UAP stuff. Because why? Because that will give them bigger budgets and bigger monies, because they haven't had a new war in the United States for how many years now? It's been way, way long. So they need a conflict. They need for that Werner von Braun prophecy to come true, that the last great conflict of these global actors will be fake alien invasion, so that they can unify the world behind them, and then move forward with this, trying to fight against the fake alien invasion, I guess, that they themselves are creating.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. There's so many narratives going on, and people debate all the time in our channels about, are these spiritual? Are these extra dimensional? Are these, the Project Bluebeam? Are they holograms? I mean, and I think all the above is true. All the things are going on at the same time.
Exactly, because real UFOs, real alien visitors, they are extra dimensional. They are also spiritual, like you just mentioned. And that's why we have this phenomena also of what they call in the alternative community, they call them walk-ins. Well, I'd never heard that before last year. That goes back to John Keel and Jacques Vallée, goes back to their writings and their thinkings back in the 70s and 80s, where they said that these spiritual alien, the real alien phenomena, it tends to be on the spiritual spectrum as well. And that's why it's possible to have walk-ins, where they actually sort of like take possession of the person. And again, there's a lot of moving parts, so it's sometimes it's difficult to explain all the parameters of this, because there's so many different things involved with this. Especially, but at the first phase, what we have to do is step back and see: are we talking about real UFOs, real alien visitors that we have had personal experience with, or is it this new man-made phenomena that they're trying to pull on us at this point? If you can answer that question, you're in really good shape.
John, I was gonna ask you about that, because I feel like last month, being February, there was like an unprecedented mainstream sort of conversation that began after we had the Chinese balloon. There was all of a sudden Justin Trudeau, and which is impossible to believe, and Joe Biden, they shot these down, and yet we allegedly, right? And this it's a bizarre change of position, right? All this, it's felt like for years there's been a lid that's trying to keep a lid on all this stuff, right? Or discredit. And I know that the dissemination of information in the age we're in, it's almost impossible. But all of a sudden, and now we got the Pentagon saying there's a mothership. This is last week, I believe. A mothership sending
Umamua. It's a Hawaiian word. Umamua. It's a giant mothership, cigar-shaped asteroid that they're saying is intelligently guided, and it's on the way here right now.
And what's your take on that? Why all this? Is this a ramping up of a lot of conditioning that's happened over the years?
Yes.
Are we?
Yes, but it's also putting in missing puzzle pieces into the situation, and the mothership that now has been announced by all worldwide media. I mean, this went all over the world. The global wires.
It's just weird, man. It's like Independence Day, John. It's like, dude, this is so unbelievable on a million levels.
But if you think about it as an investigator, think about the fact that, well, what just happened? You just said it. You had an incompetent like Trudeau and Biden, and also, tell you what, Putin also said he's just shot down a UFO as well.
Yeah.
So this has been going on all over the world. I'll bet you it's gone on in China too. I bet China shot down a couple of UAPs, as they're saying it. So now, with the announcement of this mothership that is coming back, I can just because I know how governments act, I know that, well, you know what they're gonna, because we're getting now to the point, this UAP program, this big push, as you said, that happened last month, it's going on for a reason. They want this to happen. And now we're getting to the point where, as I announced with the guy from Fox News, I just announced that we're now at the point where the UAPs have to go to the next step. They have to go to the next step because people aren't that thrilled or interested as much as you would think.
It's bizarre. It's really bizarre, honestly.
So And so they have to go to the next step. What's going to be the next step? It's going to be the next step that I believe we're going to see now, which is we're going to see UAPs shooting down our airliners and our military pilots out of the skies. That's where we are right now. We're going to see active, direct violence committed by these UAPs against our aircraft.
And wait, John, if we go back, you said the UAP is man-made.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Are these domestic actors? Are these foreign actors?
Well, that's
both.
That's the next question. And we've had a lot of people running around. In particular, we have a congressman from Tennessee who is running around. He's been on a lot of shows, and he is trying to determine. And he said in his determinations, it looks like these UAPs are definitely man-made. They also have the signatures of our aerospace companies. Our aerospace companies are participating in creating these things, possibly with Roswell technology, reverse engineered technology from Roswell as well. But he says it's apparent that these UAPs are not under the control of any national actors, not of the USA, China, Russia. No, it's not.
So there's a black budget project.
Yes, there are black budget projects, but they are connected to another black reality, which is the cabal. Apparently, the cabal are the ones who have control over these vehicles and who are building them up to use towards some great purpose that they have, long range.
And we know that historically the way our government works is sometimes we attack ourselves and then we present ourselves as the heroes in the story.
Exactly.
And you can go all the way. I mean, I remember the beginning of that documentary, Loose Change. It was all about that. It was like 6 or 7 times the government has attacked itself, or everything from Pearl Harbor to all these events where it was like, oh, we got attacked. So that's what's coming, right? Like they're going to make it look like there's an actual threat using sort of some hijacked.
But just to finish up the missing piece that I was talking about with Umawa. The giant mothership asteroid / UAP that's coming here right now. What they're going to do when they have already announced that this mothership is coming back to Earth, and it's probably going to be releasing probes towards the Earth. Now, what do you think those probes are going to look like? I bet they're going to look exactly like these Tic Tacs that we have been seeing. These silver-colored, kind of oval-shaped little ships that have been built up all over the place by people. And I bet they're going to be taking direct action against our aircraft. And the governments are basically going to say, oh no, they're here for revenge because we created the problem by shooting down these UFOs, which we never showed you the remnants of.
No, of course not.
Like Osama bin Laden. We never showed you any remnants of it. And we're never going to show you. Yeah. But you could just take our word for it that we shot down these UFOs and that it was a terrible mistake because now the mothership is here and they're here to take revenge. We're so sorry. But now the only way to get out of this is that you guys have to unify behind us so that we can try to do something about this.
It's Reagan 87, right? It's the UN speech. It's the, I've talked about this in the show before, but it's fascinating that he, in the speech, going to offhandedly the UN of all things, is saying that it would take an existential crisis to unite humanity, like something like an alien invasion is 87, and here we are in 2023, and
all of a sudden they're hostile.
Right.
It's the playbook. It's fascinating because I'm with you. First off, like the things that we've seen, whether it be the Tic Tac video or anything else, some of those things move so incredibly fast that it's like we're not shooting that down with a Sidewinder or a Patriot missile. Like that's not happening. I mean,
that's why I try to urge people to read my book, The Extra Dimensionals, so that so that you'll understand what these alien visitors and real UFOs actually are, how they function, what they do. I mean, one of the signatures of letting us know that something is actual real UFO is that UFO ships have this ability to appear, to materialize, and unappear, dematerialize as well. UAPs don't have that ability. They can move in crazy ways and stuff like that, but they can't just disappear. And real UFOs also have the ability to shape shift. They are made out of a material that is sort of plasma in nature, where they're usually filled with light. For the most part, they are filled with light, and they are able to shapeshift and also become intangible, so that things pass through them. We saw that at the Battle of Los Angeles, where we had it almost looked like two motherships that appeared off the California coast, and and this happened in like 1938 or something.
Yeah.
And they send up all these shells, and the shells just passed right through them and killed like 5 or 6 people on the ground. And then after the photos they kept taking photos the whole time.
Yeah.
And after the smoke cleared, you saw these 2 motherships that were just happily sailing away without a mark on them. Okay? That's because they were real UFOs. They were intangible. They had that ability. That's how we know these UAPs aren't really UFOs. They aren't really extraterrestrial in nature. And that's one of the clues for that. And also, whenever you hear the government say, or anybody say, hey, we just shot down a UFO, UFOs are not purely physical. They are not purely physical. They cannot be shot down. They can't. They can't do that.
What about some of the things that they've supposedly crashed, like Roswell incident, where some of them have crashed?
Excellent question. Yeah. Roswell was a setup, but it was done. And I got to tell you, this is my conclusion after so many years of investigation of this incident. Roswell was, it was not a crash of a UFO, because UFOs cannot crash, obviously. They're not like you and me. They're not getting into tin cans that just sail across the sky and can crash just like that. That's not what's happening. What happened with Roswell is that was done by people at the top of the cabal, the elites that believe that they run everything, and along with reptilian aliens. I believe they were reptilian, who used this incident to create some piece of machinery so that they could do technology transfer. That's ultimately what they did. And they did the agreement at Grijalta, I believe it's called Grijalta, with Eisenhower, where they forced him to sign the agreement that he would take technology from the reptilian aliens. And so Roswell was a very special case, because the bodies that they found in there they were just hybrids that were created with the cooperation of the aliens as well, the reptilian aliens, I believe. And but they weren't aliens, and yet the whole situation was set up with the assistance from aliens who actually put in their tech to be transferred to humanity. So and those hybrid bodies were just shells. They were just nonsense that they threw together. Aliens have always had the ability to create other alien bodies, as we see with the Anunnaki, who left all of their records back there on the ancient hieroglyphs as well. So they've always had that ability. So that's why Roswell is a very unique circumstance, because they were looking to do technology transfer. They were looking to get the Grijalta agreement signed, where they get a certain number of bodies every year without investigation by human authorities. And they just get all those bodies, and they have to give technology in exchange. And that's what I believe happened at Roswell.
Sounds very much like what we talk about, how that all this, basically what we've come to understand on our show, like how all this started with this technology exchange for women back on Mount Hermon, back in the supposedly started the golden age with the giants and the Nephilim and angels messing with human beings, which is a whole nother conversation, I'm sure. But it also sounds a lot like, what Bigfoot can do. They can shapeshift, or they can phase in and out, and all this other weird stuff. So when did you start in your career to notice that? Because there's a lot of narratives going on. We could pick a lot of rabbit holes just basically on what you just said.
Yeah, I know. Right?
When did you start to realize that, everything you're being told in your career isn't what you're, because there's multiple psyops going on at the same time, and it's hard to know, because we hear them all day long on our show, and it's people debate all the time. And I'm just wondering when you kind of started putting these pieces together.
Well, it was when I first went into the FBI, and we had an old case that was hanging around, and the case was called the Miami Massacre, or the Miami Shootout, and it involved a couple of hillbilly bank robbers named Maddox and Platt, and it was one of the great mysteries in the FBI at the time, in the in the 80s. And it was basically these two bank robbers who got caught by an FBI and police, Miami police task force. And they were forced into a large parking lot by their cars. And they crashed them in there. And then, but they could see the two Maddox and Platt in there. They had lots of weapons. They were getting ready. Well, as soon as they exited their vehicle, and this all happened in 1985.
Wow.
And
Good year.
And when they were exiting the vehicle, the entire task force shot them to pieces. They shot them to pieces because they weren't going to give up, obviously. So they shot them to pieces. One of them got shot through the aorta, the main ventricle that goes to the heart. And instead of falling down and dying, they went into their car, got more weapons, and came out shooting. And then they went ahead, they did a semicircle around that parking lot and just started shooting every FBI agent and police officer in that parking lot, like the Terminator, okay?
Wow.
And they just marched right through there, shot them all, got into their vehicle, turned on the vehicle to leave, basically. And then what happened was we had one hero FBI agent who popped up in front of them as they were leaving and with a shotgun and a pistol, and he was able to empty both guns towards them, and he was finally able to sever their spinal cord at the neck for both of them. And that's what finally killed them. That's the only thing that killed them. So after that, that was a major scandal where everybody, all the politicians, everybody wanted to, because it was the incident where like the most FBI agents had been killed in a single incident ever. And so people wanted to know, how did they do what they did? How did those guys do what they did? We had some phony baloney FBI scientists step forward and say, well, it had to be angel dust. It was angel dust because that was popular at the time. And they said, this stuff can, if you load up on it, it can give you superhuman strength and you can do enormous superhuman acts and it's amazing, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, so that they tried to make that go away. And then the blood work came back and showed that they didn't even drink a beer before they came and did what they did. They smoked a couple of cigarettes. That's it. Nothing else.
Marboro Reds makes you superhuman, right?
Marboro. They probably were Marboro. If I know my hill.
They rip the filter off. Exactly. We're gonna go crazy.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure that's how that went down. But we then when I just started at the FBI, I started asking questions about it. Came across a couple of deputies who had actually worked the case. And I asked them, I said, so what do you think went on here? And they said, when we ransacked their apartments, all we found was a little altar. We found that the last thing they did before they went out was there was incense still burning in a little altar to the Nordic gods, Thor and Loki and the runes. They had all kinds of runes in there and stuff. And they had done sacrifices to something that was described as Berserker spirits. And when I found that out, I said to them, that's how they did it. That's how they did it. They did sacrifice, incense sacrifice to these Berserker spirits, and then they were inhabited by them. They came to them, they helped them, and they gave them the ability to do these superhuman things that they did.
I've heard the Vikings did the same thing. They call them the Berserkers.
Well, so it comes from, right? Yeah, the Berserkers were like crazy, like unstoppable, bloodlust warriors of lore. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what I believe went down. And but when I told the FBI about that, they weren't very. Actually, I didn't even tell the FBI. They just found out through hearing, listening to people, and they were not happy with that. They were not happy with me. So that was the first time I got punished. Not the last, but the first time that I got punished in the FBI for that, for my inquiries into that. And that was the first time that I really found out that the narrative we get from our institutions almost always deceptive. They're deceptive. And one of the large reasons is because they just cannot deal. Mainstream organizations, mainstream institutions cannot deal with paranormal realities. They don't want to, and they don't want to.
Right.
And they'll find anything else to avoid those mainstream narratives, to avoid paranormal realities that happen every day. And that's why I wrote my first book, The Para-Investigators. Para-Investigators is about all the investigators throughout history who have used paranormal abilities to help people and sometimes even to save people's lives. And then how they, after the fact, because people can't explain how they did what they did, why they get punished. They get punished and they get recriminations. And it's all because people just can't deal with their abilities and the way that they do things, which are not the mainstream way of doing things.
It's really complicated, and that's the thing that keeps coming to my mind is this, like, it's really complicated because the same thing you can say about creatures like Bigfoot. Like, some people love to demonize this creature, and some people like to, give him gifts and invite him over for Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. And it's just the weirdest stories come out, and sometimes Bigfoot's saving kids, and sometimes Bigfoot is going into campsites and ripping people apart, and you hear all the above, and it's like, what is it? And it creates, just in the Bigfoot space, just this massive divide of arguments of what it is. So what do you think Bigfoot is, John? Like,
oh, here we go. We got here finally.
I think it could be. I think it's most likely both ways. I think probably the Bigfoot creatures are not monolithic in their attitude towards humans, because I absolutely believe the story of the little girl that was this story was first came to light through Dave Paulides, and even if I remembered the little girl's name, I couldn't say it because this involves families and you can't say people's names with this stuff. But it was a little girl that was, she was about 6 or 7 years old, very, very young, but still able to talk and describe things. So she had been missing, and they said to each other, don't go further up the mountain. There's no way. The little girl was apparently naked because, one of the things that always raises the alarm with investigators is when we see little children that have been stripped naked, but there's no sexual abuse. That tells us there's something not human working here. Mm-hmm. Because every criminal in the world, when they strip clothing off of a person, it's for sexual abuse. That's part of the reason. But this is something very, very different, because when you see little children with their clothing taken off, but there's no sexual abuse, it means something else is happening, something not human. So this little girl, like other little children, had her clothing stripped off, and she was eventually recovered way further up the mountain, a place that she could not have gotten to on her own. And we were able to recover her. And when they did, it was like at the foot of around a very shallow cave. Mm-hmm. And they were able to get her back. And then she told the story. She said it was the big magic beard man. Mm-hmm. And they said to her, why do you, so you mean he had a beard on his face? And she said, yes, and all over his body too. All over his body, there was a beard covering his entire body. And she said, and why do you call him magic? And she said, because he opened magic gateways. He was taking me to a crystal city, some sort of crystal city that was inside that cave. And it all opened up and it was beautiful. And she said, but then he was held back by something. Something let him not proceed any further with me. And of course, she also explained that he peeled her clothing off of her because he seemed to be offended by it, like it was something very unnatural and cumbersome. And that was the reason why he peeled clothing off of her, so she could be in a more natural state. And then he was just carrying her along into the Crystal City. He was not allowed to go there for some reason, and that's when he put her down and proceeded on his own. And then that's when she was recovered. And that's what she told us. So
that's wild.
Yeah. So, I mean, that right there tells me, and I believe that story is true because this little girl just described it so accurately as far as what happened, and it all coincides with the circumstances of how she was found. And then she was recovered, and of course, probably now as a teenager, probably the little girl doesn't even remember this story because that's what tends to happen with trauma. Kids with time, they tend to block it out. Yeah. So, but I do believe what she said. But then again, I also believe the situations where hunters say that they have seen comrades being pursued by something that was enormously large, it was enormously big, had a lot of power to it, had this voice that was so loud that they had to cover their ears for their eardrums not to be blown out. And then they've also seen these things kill certain individuals, certain animals and people as well. So that's possible that also is true, which if that's also true, then that means there are Bigfoot type creatures that are benevolent towards people, and then there may be some that are also terrible towards people.
But baddies, there's some baddies out there.
And I believe both could be very well true as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's kind of where Politis came in, because Politis helped me sort of think beyond Bigfoot, because I think at first when you get into the paranormal space, Bigfoot's an easy, like we say on our show, it's a gateway drug. Yeah. It's like the first really weird thing you can kind of, there's physical evidence for this creature. There's been documented sightings. There's some decent films. There's footprints. There's castings. There's science. But then, you get into the weird stuff like where clothes are folded and people just like walk through a dimension. They're here and they're not here. There is no animal involved. There is no explanation that's easy. And then Bigfoot goes from just this undiscovered hominid, that goes back to, Gigantopithecus to something else. It's not as easy. It's not an easy answer anymore. And then, UFOs, abductions, and aliens, and all this other stuff starts coming into your worldview. And then who knows? From there, it's like everything just the bottom falls out, and you get more confused.
Absolutely. But I wanted to say people should definitely see our movie, the one that I made with David Politis recently, the 411 Missing, the UFO Connection.
Yeah.
John, actually, I wanted to ask you, I'm glad you brought that up. I think when your interview, one of the reasons we were excited to try to talk to you was, and it was a comment that it was just sort of an aside, right? And I thought it was so profound because Dave was telling all these, he's so systematic in all of these cases and the earmarks of all these cases and how he pairs them down and how he investigates these and how he classifies them, right? And he's talking to you about the UFO stuff. You say, yeah, it's extra dimensional, and then you kind of move on. And I'm just like, whoa, can we go back to this real quick? Because I think that's a lot of things that we kind of believe or we delve into on our show, but it's not the narrative you hear, right? It's always like this is extraterrestrial, which I can also buy that in the sense that like these things aren't of Earth, at least a lot of it isn't, but not in the sense of the way that people talk about extraterrestrial. So I wanted to ask you about that comment because you guys were in this conversation and just kind of kept going, and I was like, man, John just said this is extra dimensional, and then I'm realizing you wrote a book about it. So I know this is you've opined on this at length. But talk to us a little about when you're answering that question and thoughts, because Dave was talking about some crazy stuff that was happening. There was cubes and people, and elk getting taken, and people going to some other place. But you, without missing a beat, said this is extra dimensional.
Absolutely, and the reason I believe that is because just as I believe that Bigfoot also is an extra dimensional race that is phasing in and out of existence in our physical reality. And people have a hard time with that because Bigfoot is such a physical phenomena, breaking trees, throwing boulders, and this incredibly loud voice that people just blows their eardrums out. So because of that, specifically, people have a hard time believing that Bigfoot is extra dimensional in nature. But the first people that really introduced me to the reality of extra dimensionality, that alien visitors are from other dimensions, it was the FBI. when I was first given this report that I feature in my book, The Extra-Dimensionals. It is a memo, a government memo from an FBI agent who's also a scientist. It has the numbers 6751, memo 6751, and it is at vault.gov.fbi. And you just go into that site. It has all the declassified documents from the government, from the FBI, declassified over the years. And you can just go into there, and then you go to, there's a big label that says unknown mysteries, something like that. It says unknown mysteries. And if you click on that button, it gives you animal mutilations, UFOs, extrasensory perception investigations. It gives you all these different paranormal things. And it also is amazing because this document says in it that an FBI agent is saying, I have an informant. My informant is supernormal, which is an old-timey way. This was in 1947. It's an old-timey way of saying is supernatural. It is this document. It's just a one-page memo. And all it says, and as a matter of fact, it's in here. It's right here with the strikeouts.
Yeah.
You see those strikeouts and all
some
that?
redactions, yeah.
It's a one-page memo, and it is on, if you go to that website that I just told you, you hit on Unknown Mysteries, and then it'll open up UFOs. Well, you go to UFO Group of Documents, group number 1. Go to page 22. That's it. That's the document, 6751. And you are able to download these for free. Everybody can get, you can get as many old, dusty government documents as you want from this site.
I like it.
And it's all free. It's all available. But this is probably the most downloaded document in the history of government documents. And basically it just says my informant is a alien visitor. I mean, that's what he implies.
Supernormal, right?
Supernormal. And he says, and because of who my informant is, a lot of you guys will not believe me, but I still have to say it because people are desperate to know what these UFOs are. Again, it was 1947 when he did this. It was just before or around the time of Roswell when they set up the Roswell PSYOP. And basically, he has 8 conclusions in there that were given to him by his informant. And it basically just says, number 1, these UFOs and the alien visitors are not physical. They're not physical because they do not belong to our universe. They are coming here from other levels of existence, from other lokas. Well, he uses the old Vedic terms, lokas, other levels of dimensions, other dimensions. And they are able to physically manifest in our area, in our world, temporarily. They're able to be temporarily physical, appear at least to be. And that's also, I believe that's involved with abductions as well, where they actually translate us into their space, their little pocket dimension of what's going on.
It's like people going through walls and windows and
yes, right? Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why I give a lot of instances of that too in my book. But what we're told in this document is that the UFOs are not made of metal like we would make these ships of metal. They're made out of a plasma-like substance, which also means shifting matter. They can shift matter from one type, from light to material, and they can shift back again. So in other words, they're able to appear and disappear, and they're able to become intangible. All of these things that I'm trying to tell people originally come from this document. That's why people need to read this document. And
John, almost sounds like a Valiant Thor thing, right? Like, and I don't know if there's any truth to that.
It does. You're right.
But like, it
sounds very much like Valiant Thor. And for all I know, that could have been his informant. I
know it's 1957. So, but it's interesting that there's like this informant, and then if our listeners are
a Valiant Thor even before the 1950s.
Sure, and if you aren't familiar with that, I encourage you to if you're listening to look it up. But there's this whole story about this apparent extraterrestrial Valiant Thor who showed up more or less on the White House lawn, and then stayed.
He was a Nordic, right?
Yes, and then stayed and hung out, right, and was interviewed at the Pentagon and had like some kind of silver suit that was like real tight fitting. Sounded like he wanted like he was a boy band guy before boy bands, but or maybe an '80s rocker before '80s rock. But he dressed the part. But it's fascinating the same way because this kind of fits when you think about 47, you think about the Eisenhower Accord, which is debated, but I know his great granddaughter says it really happened. And it has to do with the Roswell stuff. And then you have the reverse engineering, you have Bob Lazar, and people want to shoot holes in all that stuff, and that's fine. But it's interesting to me that, I think maybe what got me going with you is that the FBI, you have this idea of the things they do, investigate murders across state lines, et cetera, if you're into true crime, right? But you realize that there's like a lot of things that when you were in and probably even now they investigate that are weird. And we had a Navajo Ranger on the show, John Redbird Dover, and he kind of had a job like that all the time. Like, and I think it makes me feel like it's kind of like what you did, where he was just like, yeah, whenever all the weird stuff on the res we got, and he has Bigfoot and UFOs and all these, a lot of things, same things. But man, I got a lot.
And the way that we get them, just to fill in that piece for you, is that the FBI, and I'm sure the Navajo police also have, this thing called a police cooperation request, which means that even if something is not a federal violation within our purview, the head of a jurisdiction, like a sheriff, police chief, can just fill out this one-page form that says, look, I'm at the end of my rope, and if you guys have a subject matter expert in this, please send them to help me. Even if there's no violation here that falls under your organization, but if you have a subject matter expert, please send them to help me because I really need the help.
Yeah.
I've got people disappearing. They're disappearing whenever these flying saucers show up, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. There's nothing else we can do. So please send someone to help us, and that's how they get us to go and help them and do whatever we can to resolve these very touchy issues that they have sometimes.
Well,
that's how it happens.
That's kind of what that's a great segue. I wanted to ask you about, having this been your 25-year career in the FBI, what are some of the more what are some of the cases that stand out, like in some of these investigations for you? And I'm sure you've answered this question a lot, but I'm curious in some of the, I know because we talked about the X-Files and some of these things that then ended up in syndication or in television because they were reality. But for you, what are like, a few that really stand out as maybe they shifted your paradigm, maybe it was something that was so mind-bending or hard to rationalize that it really stuck with you?
Well, the first one, the first greatest investigation that did that for me was when we were requested to go to a military base. I can't say which one, but we were requested to go because there had been disappearances at this military base that nobody could explain. And a disappearance is different from, murder or a crime.
Right.
Because a disappearance, as we all know from Dave Paulides, is something where there's nothing left. There's no evidence of anything. There's no clues. There's nothing to look into because the person just disappeared like that. And sometimes they fold their clothing in a neat pile on their bed and then they're just gone.
Yeah.
So there's no signs of a struggle. There's nothing to investigate. So there was a military base commander, basically, a colonel commander who was in charge of his military base, and he had no answers. And he had these UFOs that kept showing up right outside his base and there was a group of hippies that had set up a regular observance.
Wow.
Observance. Hey, no offense, guys. The word hippies. And
no, we're not offended, John.
You guys are mountain men.
That's right. We just got don't let the beers fool you, man. Like we're not.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So these guys, they just had a regular observance. So we went to stand with the guys in the regular observance. Apparently, it happened like every one last Saturday of the month, and that's when it would happen.
Like clockwork.
Like clockwork,
wow.
Exactly. So we went to observe, and then these vehicles, this one vehicle, it was a UFO that was filled with light. I mean, it just was giving off light as far as we could see, but it was nighttime too, so we were more sensitive to that.
Right.
But this thing just came right at us, and then everybody ran, including myself and my partner, and then the thing just appeared to just come right on us, and we went flat and we were waiting to get crushed, and then the thing just went right on us and disappeared. Went right through us into the ground, it seemed like.
Wow.
And that was it. It was gone. And then I got picked up by men who were just dressed. They looked like soldiers, but they were dressed in all black. No uniforms, no insignia at all. And then they took me into the base because they interrogated me on how I summoned that UFO and what did I have to do with the UFO that the thing just came right to me. And that was it. They interrogated on me on that.
Wow. As an agent, you got interrogated by who? Do you need to find out who these people are?
No, I never did, except when we called back to FBI headquarters to get me released, they told us, oh, we know who those guys are. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They're going to release him like any second. Just go stand at the gate. And my partners did. And then they just let me go.
What's your best thought, John? Is it, I mean, it was CIA,
my best thought
CIA
is there were no soldiers in that base at that time. It was all just these guys dressed in black uniforms. The base commander wasn't there. I mean, they had been evacuated out of there. Huh. And it was only these guys that were there. And my best guess is that these guys they're basically from the elite powers in control. So, they're from the cabal, basically. And they are part of the troops of the cabal because they had greater power than the base commander at that point. And they were the ones pursuing these UFOs to try to find out.
Interesting. Wow.
It's almost like you have layers of military, and it seems like it corresponds even with just you have surface government agencies, and then you have these deep underground military bases, and then you also have just secret places in the world where they might meet up. And we've heard all this stuff on our show, and it gets really confusing. Do you think that when you say interdimensional, are they able to just are they in our space and time, but they're able to manipulate time itself, and so it seems interdimensional. Yes. It seems like they phase in and out, yes. But they could just be. Yes. They could always be here, but they can manipulate us and our
space time.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. They absolutely can. And we had a great investigator named Jim Mars, who wrote a great book called The Alien Agenda. And one of the things that he determined in there, and I've spoken to him before he passed away. I think it was a couple of years ago. But he was a superior investigator. And one of the things that he investigated was whenever these cars would be driving on the highway underneath one of these UFOs that just show up. These UFOs just show up and start trailing these cars. And one of the things that happens is that the cars completely turn off. They turn off, all the electronics turns off, the car no longer runs, and it just stays there paused as the UFO comes in to do whatever business they're going to do. And one of the things that he determined is that he said all these people, all these, especially scientific types, are thinking that the UFOs are hitting the cars with an electromagnetic pulse to disrupt all the electronics. He says that's not the case at all. He says if you go and look at the mechanisms that are still working and the ones that are not, he says some of them have no electronic component at all, and yet they are stopped. Mechanical processes are stopped completely. He says what happens is not that they're using an electronic magnetic pulse, these real UFOs. What they're doing is they're stopping time in a bubble where the car exists. That's what they're doing. Because he said it's the only thing that explains all the mechanical processes being stopped at that moment, the way that they are, just cut off at the same moment in time, as all the electronic processes also are cut off. So he says that's what's going on. These things have the ability to stop time in a limited space. They're stopping time. Then he said that's also probably how they accomplish the opening of some kind of pocket dimension where they control everything, and that's probably a component of abductions as well, where all of these people, they'll always say, oh no, aliens are physical. I know they're physical because they came and they abducted me, and so you're not going to tell me that probing I went through wasn't physical, because I know it was. So that's one of the things we come up against, because it's hard to explain to those people that it really is starting to appear that it wasn't physical, that what they do is they're translating the person. They stop time, and then they open up this other dimension. It's sort of like a pocket dimension where they have total control of everything. And because if they weren't, they wouldn't have so much control over the subjects in these situations. And they use this pocket dimension to do their abductions, their whatever, they're taking samples, all those things. So that's how that works. And it's kind of counterintuitive, so people have a hard time understanding it. But it's also part of the great campaign that they always are pushing forward of alien imminency. That's a good way of putting it. Alien imminency. They want you to believe that aliens are completely physical and they could show up at any time on the White House lawn. Anytime. It could happen. It could happen like that tomorrow. But it can't, because they are not physical. They would have a very hard time showing up on the White House lawn for everyone to see and everyone to talk to. And when and if that does happen, it's going to be the man-made aliens that are going to be showing up there. That's the reason why we need to educate ourselves about this, because there is a coming great deception that is going to be arriving very soon. And we see pieces of it coming in to view, because this is a long-term project for them. It is, like Werner von Braun said, it is the last great conflict that the elites are going to set up in order to unify all of humanity behind, or I should say under them, underneath them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, because you have PSYOP beneath PSYOP, behind PSYOP, and we have a lot of people who go down all kinds of funky rabbit holes, and we limit ourselves a little bit with creatures, but we talk about a lot of these things on our show, and we go back to the ancient world, and they were building things beyond human capability. They had this technology, like there was an exchange back in the day. And so we talk a lot about that on our show. What do you think? I guess the question is you've opened up the can of worms of so there are sort of like the grays, right? A lot of people say they're these lifeless or fleshy robots, and they're taking people and they're doing experiments. And even David Politis is talking about some of that on our episode of these weird abductions, and they're going on craft, and how do you piece this together? How do you put together a framework to understand what's going on? Because I mean, anything could be true at this point when you start introducing these robotic aliens, and then you have the real aliens, and you have the fake UFOs, and you have the real UFOs. It gets more complicated, I guess.
It does, but I think you have to develop a spiritual, intuitive sense in these things, because I'll tell you, even if you think that you're not a spiritual individual, you are. Your spirit can discern when something is evil or something is good. I've had many people who have these alien encounters, and they have healed them of diseases, healed them of conditions, and made them much, much better.
Oh, so it was like Carl in the film, right? Didn't he had TB scars, then he came back. I think it was Carl, right? And then he doesn't have them, which is odd, right? Because
absolutely.
Because you feel like most of the experiences are people like getting sexual experiments or getting sex cells and sperm or eggs taken or pregnancies taken, and you have all these, which is odd that there's sort of this other thing that kind of happens every once in a while too.
The real purpose behind mutilations, animal mutilations, even human mutilations that happen sometimes, and human abductions, is harvesting of tissue. This is really the real purpose of these of these incidents as they happen, because apparently there are alien races that are building up these enormous banks of human tissue that I believe eventually they're going to be sending back to us in other forms, in mutated forms, in the same way that the Anunnaki, untold millennia ago, also used human tissue and other hybrid tissue to create all kinds of weird things that they did. And I think we're going to be facing that again in the future when these banks of tissue, human and animal tissue as well, from various sources. This has been going on for thousands of years. So imagine how big those banks are, those banks of tissue that they are going to use for a very important purpose later on. That's what we're facing. That's going to be scary. When we get all that tissue back.
Well, it's the genetic stuff, right? It's what we see in the biblical narrative. We see Genesis 6, and we see that all flesh is corrupted. So both you have human hybrids and you have animal hybrids, and you have these. Yeah, I mean, it's a circle, right? And it's interesting because you talk about how this is all culminating to this grand deception, and if you our show's a lot about all of this stuff through the biblical narrative, and you think about like what eschatology and what happens in Revelation, and that's the same thing, right? It's the uniting of the world underneath the Antichrist, and we talk about the cabal, and you have this grand deception. There's going to have to be something like that in order to unite humanity, and this is something we talk about on the show all the time. I think I harp on this more than anything. It's like, how are you going to get Chechens and Russians? How are you going to get Sunnis and Shia Muslims? How are you going to get the American and the Chinese and the Jews and the Arabs and all these people to unite, right?
Independence Day.
Yeah, it really is this existential crisis. I think you've nailed it. That has to be it. It has to be a threat to humanity, or a perceived threat to humanity, that causes everybody to be like, well, let's just forget about the fact we've been fighting for millennia, because this is about survival. And I do believe that. I think the more that we charge through in our show, it's like, dude, this is how it has to be. I don't see how it happens any other way. And even in the occult traditions, there's prophecies about this philosopher king that's supposed to come, and it's essentially the Antichrist that you see in Revelation and in the biblical narrative. And I think I wanted to ask you this because you talked about in the book how some of the things you've talked about have come true. And then when we were talking about this, you said you believe that some of the next things we'll see are the UFOs, UAPs, whatever they call it in the mainstream media. Would it be kinetically taking down our aircraft? Would it be commercial? It's just really scary to think about. And then our military. What else do you think is going to happen here in the nearer term? And we can talk about, because we don't know what timeline is, but I'd love to hear.
I can tell you one thing. When that happens, we're going to have all of our airliners, all of our aircraft is going to be grounded worldwide. And the world leaders are going to say, we have to do this in order to resolve this problem and do some negotiation with the aliens. And that's going to be one of the ways to get to us, because people are going to say, well, what? So we can't travel anywhere until this is resolved? Okay, well, yeah, maybe we should unite behind them. Yeah. Also, contemporaneous with that, another thing that's going to happen is that the world governments are going to announce that they just found out that about 50% of humankind are actually alien hybrids.
Oh, boy.
Okay? And that in order for them to follow this out to its logical conclusion, everyone has to turn in their DNA, kind of going along with what's been going on in this COVID crisis.
Right, the last couple of years, right? This feels like a dry run.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's going to be based on some of what they've laid down during that period, and they're going to say, "Hey, everybody, turn in your DNA. We need to collect it. We need to read it very carefully, because only we know the criteria of how we know if you're an alien hybrid, because the aliens are telling us that we need to figure this out right now." And so a lot of people are going to be all for that, because it's going to be kind of like a privileged position to be found to be an alien hybrid. So a lot of people are going to be okay with this, and they're going to say everybody has to turn in their DNA in order for this to work. Same thing as the vaccinations that have been going on in the recent past.
Yep.
And it's going to be, well, everyone has to do it, and then it's going to be a whole world of pressure for everybody to turn in their DNA to the government in order for them to make this determination.
Is it a caste system, or is it genocide? Is it state-sponsored genocide? What do you think they're going to do with that?
Oh, they are going to use it for bad purposes, and there's going to be a lot of resistance against turning in your DNA to the government for any purpose. And then we're going to that's going to be more chaos on top of these UAPs attacking our cities, probably, and actually creating real destruction. And people believe that it's going to be pretty holograms at that time, Project Bluebeam, and they're going to say, oh, the UAPs aren't real. Yeah, they are going to be real. The holograms can be used to do what Hollywood calls sweetening, where they can take 20 UAPs and make them look like 2,000.
Right.
But that first row, if they get you, they can kill you regardless how many holograms are around.
Right.
So that's going to be what we're facing. It's going to be crazy, guys. And that's why we need some spiritual discernment to be able to know when something is real and when it's not.
Just so we stockpile ammo as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's been my ammo for a while now. Is just keep on collecting.
Here in Arizona, everybody has guns.
Yeah.
And we've had these incidents, and these incidents have happened all over the United States. We had this the Phoenix Lights that occurred in 2008.
Yep.
Occurred in 1996 and then occurred again in 2008. And you know that there were several law enforcement types and people who were gun enthusiasts who actually saw this giant black 2-mile long vehicle going low and slow over the Phoenix Mountains. And a bunch of people pulled out their firearms and were ready to shoot this thing. And that probably happened in dozens of situations. Every single one of those people got some kind of a mental communication from somewhere that said to them, no, don't shoot at this thing. It's not a good idea. Put it away. And every single one of those people took their firearm, put it away, and did not shoot.
Sounds like the South, John. We're in the South here. We're in Tennessee, so it's like we always I make a joke every once in a while about that if they could shoot it down, they would, and then they'd barbecue it, see what it tastes like. We're in Texas, Tennessee. What does it matter?
So I mean, over the years has your perspective changed a lot? Have you honed in on some ideas? Because it sounds like you've got, on our show we talk a lot about what are the demons, what are the ancient demons. Demons are spirits. They're the spirits of the dead giants, that supposedly were hybrids, the fallen ones, right? And it sounds like some of these, it's like angelic beings, angels, if we believe the biblical story, and we do on our show. It's like you have them helping people, them interacting with humans from day one. Angels roll on the scene in so many Bible stories. And where are they from? They're not humans. They're not here with us. And so a lot of Christians who are sort of have a very elementary view of this whole realm. They just slap demons on everything. And we tried on our show just to say, look, no, demons are like wandering spirits. It's a very, very classified entity in the Old Testament and the New Testament, obviously, too. But it's not that easy. And so we get a lot of debates, John. So it's always good to kind of put more framework and get a hierarchy of what's going on to help get people make sense. Because I do believe a deception is going to come, but a lot of people think it's all fake. It's all holograms. There is no actual aliens. There is no actual any of these things. So it's good to do these interviews because I think my heart is to help people not be deceived by the multiple psyops going on at the same time.
Well, the Bible is loaded with descriptions of UFOs and alien-like creatures, and it's all over the place. I mean, in the book of Revelations, one of the final things that's going to be happening during the apocalypse is that it says these creatures are going to come out of the earth, which many UFOs do come out of the earth, and volcanoes and things of that sort. And these creatures are going to come out, and they're going to kind of look like scorpions, but they're actually going to be locusts.
Like locusts,
And they're going to have the power to use their tails to torture men and women, and they're going to be unstoppable. and they're going to be these creatures that seek out men and sting them, and that these things will be so bad that men will wish to die, will not be able to die.
Come on.
Be able to die. I mean, that's telling you a lot of information. And as an investigator, just a simple investigator, you can tell the Bible is the only sacred book that is actually true based on one criteria. It's the only book, and people can argue against this all day. It just runs by me like white noise. It's the only sacred book that actually has the original writings that have been miraculously found all over the Middle East and other parts of the world as well. And every single word.
It's unchanged.
Thank God for Jewish scholarship,
right.
Because these guys, they found every single word that was in the Bible. And as a matter of fact, even today, you can go to something called Blue Letter Bible Search, and you can actually look up any verse and then go to the original Hebrew or the original ancient Greek that was also used for the New Testament. And you can find every single word. There's no other sacred book that you can do that with.
And there's copies like, the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? They find them, they go, man, this is all... I mean, that's why we talk about books in the Apocrypha, like Enoch, which had been not canonized, and there's a lot of reasons, and we're not getting into that in this show, in this episode at all, but the idea that it existed, it was the second most copied book for the Essenes, and it predates everything. It predates Christ, and you go, okay, there's something to some of this, and then in addition to that, you have all of these copies, and then it's validation, right? And you go, so I'm with you, man. I think it's a... Man, that's where we live in our show, and I think everything you're talking about with the Great Deception just makes sense in when we talk about eschatology, and trying to understand what happens at the end. Because when you open up the Bible and you read Revelation, you look at the things you're talking about, and you go things like they'll beg for death and it won't come to them, and you have these interesting, and people talk about prophetic iconography, and it's but John is describing something he's seen. And he's a first century human, and we are now in 2023, and who knows when the end of days will become. It often feels like we're close, but everybody thought they were close, right? But this UFO thing, I think, man, the more that we get into this and talk to folks like you and Dave and a bunch of folks that we've had on the show, it just feels like this feels like the cherry on the top of the deception. Like this is how if you're trying to do the things that in sort of uniting the world underneath a cabal, and we've talked about a lot of this NWO and one world government. I mean, that's what happens at the end, right? And in Revelation, if you ascribe to the biblical narrative, which we do, it's got to happen somehow. And Reagan 87, I think nailed it, whether he meant to or not. Maybe he did mean to. I don't know. Question, just an aside question as we talk about this, John. Like retired FBI, and you talk about a lot of interesting paranormal and things people would say is fringe, and that's where we live. So that's not a slight in any means. We do. Do you ever get concerned a little bit about talking about this stuff? As far as exposure or we talk about the government here as far as like your own safety. I mean, I don't want to make this a dark ending by any means to our show, but like I wonder sometimes, because if you expose the truth to people that are committed to lying, that becomes a problem. Right?
Not for me. I never have a concern about that at all. And there's several reasons for that. The first one is because when I talk to my friends at the FBI or any other intelligence community as well, they see all of my work as being labeled as paranormal. So they cannot... Government heads cannot get into their brain that something labeled paranormal could also be true.
Right.
You see?
Right.
So for that reason, whenever I write a book, the FBI is supposed to approve it. And they do. They prove it. It's because it's all labeled paranormal, and none of it has the actual information about, they're concerned about me telling someone what Obama used to do on weekends at the White House. When he used to have his hot dog parties. Let's have a show.
Let's have a show about that, dude. I mean, come on, right?
that they would be concerned about. See,
right.
That they would say, oh no, you cannot. This is causing problems for us. You can't. Like, we don't know what was going on with that guy. I mean, we all know that. That's not a secret.
Right.
It's not a secret at all, unfortunately.
So they can just kind of push you to the fringe, and it's safety in some ways, right? Because it's sort of like we can just discredit this, or we can say this is fringy, or this is just this is woo woo stuff, right? And
well, they don't feel they have a need to discredit it because they feel anything that you say that's paranormal.
Well, that's what I meant, really. It's not
extraterrestrial.
That's what I meant. Like if you say it's paranormal, then they're like, this is like ghost hunters, and you're like, except it's not, right?
And so they don't care at all, not a bit, not a bit at all. So that's why I'm not concerned about that ever at all. Really,
dude. Now I want to have like an off the record show and just talk about stuff that isn't going to go out to the public.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, obviously, a lot of people are skeptical, especially in our channels. They are just always, like you said, Tom DeLonge. I remember listening to him on Rogan's show, and every other word, I can't talk about that. I can't talk about that. I can't talk about that. And it was just like, what can you talk about? At least talk about something you can. And it just got annoying after a while. And a lot of people just tune out. So you have people, they're checking in. They want to get information. People are seeing things. People want to know what's going on. And it's just this endless, I'm too cool for you.
That's how you know a fake. When somebody is pretending to be something, whatever it is, but they don't have they have this, that's secret. That's secret. So many things that we have done as FBI agents were secret for a short period of time, but then they all went out to the public because a lot of times the New York Times illegally revealed a lot of this information about these big investigations. The New York Times revealed everything about the FISA court, if you guys know what that is.
Yeah.
That was one of the greatest top secrets, the existence of that court, which was a star chamber, basically. And the New York Times in the late 90s just decided, we're going to tell everybody about this and we're going to print it. And they didn't worry one bit about if they were going to go to prison because Bush was the first Bush was president at the time. He said, we're going to send all those New York Times reporters to prison for violations of the Espionage Act. We're not even supposed to know the word FISA today. But that was changed because the New York Times printed everything about that, and they violated the Espionage Act. But because they're with the cabal, none of them were ever.
Well, it feels like now, John. Like there's no justice anymore.
Exactly
across the board, right? Well, if you play for one team, there's no justice, no retribution, no.
Right.
I mean.
Right.
What are like a couple stories that you have in your career that changed your paradigm the most, that maybe were the hardest, the most head scratching, that left you kind of walking away, wondering, kind of reset you completely, because sometimes we hear those stories and it's just like, man, I thought I understood a few things, but now I don't know.
I can tell you the story of the gray baby this is from my book, The Power Investigators.
Yeah.
There was a trooper who worked with the FBI from time to time. His name was Trooper Lopez. It's not his true name. That's what we called him. That's what we call him at this point. Trooper Lopez was over on, it was Highway 66 or something. It was going through parts of California, Desert Town, California. And he was just waiting. He was just waiting by the soft gravel road there, just kind of sitting there waiting for speeders. Anyway, he had this old Lincoln Cadillac just zoomed by him going 100, and he just got ready. He did the pursuit. He pulled this thing aside. Again, it was a nice sort of shady area on the shoulder of the road there. He pulled this vehicle over. As he was approaching the vehicle, he was this typical, big swaggering macho kind of guy, and he was not concerned about being by himself on this call at all. He put his hand on his gun. He kind of swaggered up to the vehicle, and the windows were open all the way on this vehicle. And he looked into the front, and as he was approaching, as he got right up to the window, he said the atmosphere changed, the air changed. Everything became shady and dark. It had been a very sunny day, but suddenly everything had like sort of an unnatural gloom as he approached up to the window of this car. And he looked into the front seat. There was nothing there. Nothing in the front seat. And he said, okay. So he backed up and he looked into the back. And there was a figure crouched down in the back seat of this car. And he heard kind of like mewling sounds from it. It appeared to be the figure of a woman cradling and cooing to a baby that was in swaddling blanket, wrapped in a swaddling blanket. And she was kind of whispering to it and playing with it. And he shouted out to the back, to the driver. He said, driver, come forward. I can't see you. I can't see what you have in your hands either. He said, he's yelling at the person, come forward. He did his law enforcement persona, take command of the situation and make sure you neutralize everything in the area. And the lady in the back seat was kind of like not listening to him. He repeated again louder, come forward, and show me what you have in your hands. Show me what you have in your hands. There was a moment, she kind of looked up and he could see that she was kind of a skeletal, kind of death's head kind of face. It appeared to be a woman, scraggly bits of hair. It kind of looked like an old witch. I mean, she was just desiccated. She was just like a wrinkled kind of old crone, she looked like. And then he repeated to her. He repeated into the car again, which was unnaturally dark. I mean, he couldn't barely see things. And he said, show me what you have in your hands. And then these two wrinkled arms just came out of the car right up to where he was and showed him the dark, dead figure of a baby that had been dead for so long, it actually was starting to go gray, like a dark gray. There's a dribble of blood from the corner of its mouth, and it was swollen, puffy, horrific face. And then the smell hit him like a wall. I mean, it was like being hit. He said it was like being hit by tear gas. It got into his eyes, into his nose, and it hit him like a physical wall. The smell, he said he had never smelled anything like it. It was like dead, rotting flesh, but turned up, all the way up, like he'd never even guessed ever before. And it just hit him like a wall and just backed him up from this thing, this sort of baby that was put in his face. And he said he started shouting to the person as he was backing up. He said, go back into the back seat. Go back into the back seat. Just stay there. Don't move. And he swears he saw the baby's eyes start to flutter like they were going to open at that moment. And then she withdrew that thing back in. And he said, stay in the back seat. He yelled at her, stay in the back seat. And he said he felt something in his soul. It just felt like a piece of ice just taking over his inside of his chest and his stomach. And then he just went back to his vehicle and he radioed for everybody. Ambulance, for the FBI, for the troopers to respond. He radioed for everybody, and he sat by his car and he opened the door to his car because he didn't want to look at that person again. When he got to look at her again, she looked like a skeletal kind of old witch. And he said he just stayed there by his car. He said she could have just walked away if she wanted to. He wasn't going to stop her because what he felt inside of his soul was chilling.
Wow.
And he did not. He lost all the veneer of being the macho police officer who takes care of situations. And he just sat there by his car until people started responding. Troopers came, other PD people came, police department, local came, fire department also responded because they were looking at a dead body there.
Right.
He says, at least he was assuming, although he saw its eyes open at the last second. So he said he didn't know what was going on. But they did respond. They came, and he said he just stayed shivering by his car on the floor next to his car, sitting with the door open so he wouldn't have to see her. And then he said as everyone responded, they finally were able to coax her out of she was actually a young girl, but she looked like she weighed about 70 pounds. She was skeletal. And the only time he heard her start saying something above a whisper was when they started actually taking the baby from her, and then he heard her loudly say, don't take our baby. Don't take our baby from us. And he looked over and she was looking straight at him. And it kind of chilled him again because she was looking straight in his eyes. And as they were pulling the baby from her, and she kept yelling, don't let them take our baby from us. And she was just screaming right at him as he said that. And he said it was such a mistake to look over because he felt it all happening all over again. Wow. And then they did take the baby. Here's the normie explanation of what happened. She had been in a stash house, a drug house of some sort, and there had been a police raid from the local police department. They came in, they shot up her boyfriend. Everybody else in the place got shot, and she was only able to scoop up. And this was like 2 states away that this happened. She had been driving for hours in that vehicle, and she basically just was able to scoop up a stash of methamphetamines, take that, and then grab the baby, which apparently had been dead for a very long time in its crib. And she basically took that thing and took the pills and got into that vehicle and just started driving across 2 states. And that's when he later caught up to her. And all of this was being explained by a fellow trooper to him as he sat on the ground. And his friends were saying, dude, are you okay? It's okay. You couldn't have done anything for that baby. There was nothing you could, because they could see that he was out of it. He was completely out of it. And they said, listen, the baby had been dead for weeks at that point. There was nothing you could have done. Nothing you could have done could have made this better. Nothing at all. And his final remarks to his friends were, I don't care about that baby. I don't care about that baby at all, because something happened to me that I care about, and I want to see if I can fix it, because he felt that baby was something purely evil that was in it, something purely evil that it was trying to infect him with. And he said that's what happened. And he later got out on a psych out of the law enforcement. So he's no longer working law enforcement. He says as a result of the mental stress that he suffered in that incident, the incident of the gray baby. And what I found out later was that the gray baby is actually a supernatural phenomena that is called the Tiyanek. It is in the Philippines. They have, I would say, well, some people say legends. I would say it's a reality because it's in the newspapers over there all the time. The Tiyanek is a baby that they failed to bury within a certain time. A baby that dies, let's say, and a baby that does not receive proper last rites and is not buried within 1 day or something like that. In the Philippines, they have the legend that these babies turn into monsters if you don't, and they develop fangs and they seek to do evil wherever they can out of revenge for not being buried, I guess. That is the Tiyanak. And I found that out years after this case had occurred. And I said, okay, that's got to be connected to this. Right. That has to be connected to this because it's the only supernatural phenomena that we find that is a baby monster demon of some kind. And if you look at the Philippines newspapers, they have people that swear that they're confronted by these baby monsters all the time. Happen. When those things, and that's a real thing. It's in the newspapers all the time in the Philippines, and apparently it happened here as well in the story of the gray baby.
I think some of those stories are the ones that stick with us. We talked a little bit about on our show about like these haunted trains that run through. There's some sort of trauma loop and ghost ships and things like that seem to be outside of some sort of creature. It's some sort of it's like a period of time with some trauma attached to it, and it just sort of goes in a circle. and sometimes it appears physical. Sometimes people can have evidence of this haunting. And it's weird because it's not like a ghost. It's not like an apparition that just sort of floats through. It's like it appears to be a physical phenomenon that's happening. Like we told this one story of this, the guy gets on a ghost train and he has the pull cord wrapped in his pocket and he gives it to his boss and says, I rode the ghost train. And he's like, you're making up this story. He pulls out this ripcord and he's like, and his boss freaked out because he's like, we haven't had those in cars for years. And it's bizarre that some of these haunting stories can appear physical. I mean, it could have been, who knows if it, they obviously the government's going to give you the official narrative, but maybe that car is always on that freeway and she's always that lady with the baby and she's haunted for years, these people. And to get back to kind of like maybe to get back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, what do you tell people? Like when the Great Deception, like how do you give people advice? And because I'm sure it always comes down to like a spiritual question of, how do I not get deceived? How do I know what's happening? How do I make sense of these alien creatures? Are they angels? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they evil? Are they, what are some things, some sort of, I mean, obviously in our show, we use the Bible and the paranormal together, but not everyone can go there. I'm just curious some of those conversations you have with people.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you, very soon, the Bible, and I truly believe this is going to happen, the Bible is going to be outlawed by pretty much every nation on the earth. And there's going to be huge penalties for being.
It's happened before, John. It's happened before. It's going to be the first time, right? I mean,
yeah. And amazingly, no other sacred book will be outlawed.
Of course not.
It'll just be the Bible, or anything that mentions Jesus Christ also will be banned. And that's going to happen. It's already happening in many countries around the world, but it's going to happen in every country especially this one. So, and those Bible apps that we love to use, those are going to be erased. So you better make sure you have your physical copy of the Bible as soon as you can.
Make sure you can read it too. It's not the old King James, right? Because you have to learn the thous and thous and Willis. You gotta.
No, the King James is worth it.
Is
worth it.
You gotta learn some new words, right? If you're
it's worth it to do it because the King James is one of the most accurate translations that we have, basically. I mean, and that's the truth. But even if it's not, again, like I said, you have the original language available right now.
Yep.
So everybody can go back and see, did Jesus really drink wine or did he drink grape juice? We know, no, it's not. He drank wine. He drank real wine. And it's right there in the words. So anyway, but the point of that is that the Bible is a very good guide for us. But when going to your question, Nate, what do I tell people? I have to tell them the same thing. I tell them, read my books, please. Just read my books. Borrow them, get them. They're at the library, by the way. Get my books because that is where I have fleshed out the explanation of what we're supposed to do in this final period that we are in right now, these last breaths of a dying civilization that we're in the middle of right now. And I explain the self-defense of people, what they need to do for self-defense, to defend themselves, to take care of themselves, to be able to discern when you're being lied to, when you're being led down the primrose path, when you're being led the wrong way, and be able to, because there's no other way I can really do it. I do lectures and presentations also, but my books are the most in-depth way. Really, the Extra Dimensionals is the best way to explain this whole reality that is traveling at breakneck speed towards the great deception that we're facing now.
Yeah,
dude.
And in the abduction, my last question is like, so a lot of guys have said they've been abducting humans, taking pregnancies, building the army for Armageddon. You talked earlier about they're going to take our samples and say half of us are alien hybrids. Are they building a war for Armageddon? Is that kind of what this breeding program is like, getting human beings hybrid enough so they can bend the rules, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. That's very perceptive of you. Yes, that is one of the things they want to do, is be able to bend the rules by creating their own races of human hybrids, and maybe they can connect to directly so that they can bend the rules and come up with that connection back to Creator. That's what the alien races really, really want. I often have people who are Christians who criticize me and and they read my books and they tell me, why don't you just say that aliens are demons? Why don't you just say aliens are demons? It just come right out and say that. You should. And what I tell them at times is, if you read my books carefully, the real truth is much worse. Aliens, they're not demons. What they are is they are created races. They are created by angels, possibly angels create the ones that help us, the alien races that actually are on our side. It looks like that's what is happening here, and that's not biblical at all. But it's just the sense that I have from how removed these aliens are from the creator source, from the creator of our universe. And it just really seemed, and from what I see the Anunnaki did and the Nephilim did in the past, it just really looks like it's actually, the truth is that these alien races are actually in some capacity created by angels and demons as well. That's how I'm looking.
We saw that in Genesis 6, so that's not. I mean, I think one of the things, John, that we talk about is that, like, if you look around Earth here where we live, this is our realm, right? And you look at the diversity of flora and fauna, millions of different of types of life and plants and animals and insects, and I think we'd kind of be remiss if we didn't think of the spiritual realm. We want to talk about dimensions, realms. It's all semantics, right? The idea that there isn't a diversity of life there as well, right? I think we get very binary in the church and think about it's angels, demons, and God, and that's it, right? But I think we would really cut ourselves short to think that there isn't sort of a mirroring, in the sense of diversity, a mirroring sense of life on the other side, if you will. And so I think I'm there with you in a lot of ways. Like it'd be tough to think that there's just two things or three things when we look around us and there's 800 different types of frogs. You're going like, I don't know how, I don't. But guess what? In the spiritual realm, you got just three things, man: God, angels, and demons. And Satan's in there somewhere. And it's like, well, I think that's just a little short-sighted. So I mean, semantically, I think you're onto it. I think that we are. I don't think we completely understand, and I think we look at Revelation and realize that there are streets and buildings and there's civilization in what the biblical writers talked about in the sense of heaven or the heavenly realms. So there's this other civilization that's much older than we are, that predates us. If you ascribe to Job, and the sons of God stood and cheered at the creation of the earth, and there's an angelic race that predates us, and there's a fall. So, and then we know what happened, like you said, with the Nephilim and in Genesis 6. And man, it's crazy. It's been really cool to talk. Like I think that along with Dave and you, we didn't talk to someone who was in law enforcement and who's very like empirical and really regimented in their thought and understanding and breaking down things in a case parameter, right? Where you go, here's the evidence, here's what it says. But then to kind of get to talk to you because you got the weird stuff, which is really cool, because that's kind of, we live in the weird stuff, which is awesome. Yeah. It's been a treat, man. I feel like at the end we went around because it's. Yeah, I know. Like it's like there's so many things I wish we could pick your brain on. And here we are, and we've been almost a couple hours into it. So you've got a new book. We always want to give you a shout. You talked about it at the top, but again, remind us. Our listeners will want to find you, find your books, try to engage with you in what you do and your work. And so we want to give people a shot to do that and give you a chance to shout that out.
Yeah, my book that is it's number one bestseller on Amazon in the area of UFOs and a couple of other categories too. It's the Extra Dimensionals, True Tales and Concepts of Alien Visitors.
I love.
Look at it for a second. It's gone tremendously all over the world, and it really explains the truth about alien visitors and UFOs and who they are, what they are, And why do they want to connect with you so badly? And also how we need to know what real UFOs are, so that we'll know when the government comes up with fake ones that are coming at us at breakneck speed right now. So that's and my website is John Tama Books at johntama.books.com for all of my books with a discount. Just put in FBI 20 or FBI 30.
Oh,
you get 30% off.
Little nugget for everybody out there. I like that.
And but most people, Google tells me, and most people find me by just Googling my name, John DeSouza, the way it's spelled right here, John DeSouza, and they just find all my books and all my stuff and my websites that way. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with your audience and your people, guys, because I know they're very special and very good thinkers.
Thanks.
Thanks,
John. Yeah.
Dude, I want to pick your brain about Peru, but we'll do that another time because you said your wife is from South America.
Yes, South America, Ecuador.
Yeah. Ecuador. It's close. I mean, we've never been. I mean, it's like saying like Canada. It's close to America. You kind of tell me about stuff. It's
just make sure you don't have cash in your wallets when you're.
Yeah,
just
right.
Leave your wallets at home.
All right, when you're traveling to another place, just make sure. Well, John, it's been a pleasure, man. Hey, thanks for your time. Thanks for being flexible. I know that we moved this a few times, so thanks for being really cool about that. Yeah,
it's all good. Thank you so much, Luke, Nate. It's been good stuff, interesting stuff.
Yeah,
and you guys keep doing what you're doing. It's pretty awesome.
Thanks,
stuff.
man.
Thank you.
Important.
We'll do it again, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll have to.
All right.
We'll have to ping you and see if you're gonna come back some other time. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Good deal.
Thanks, John.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. Have a good one.